Hello and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another Historical Humans Reacts. And on today's news, we have some advanced scanning techniques that show confiscated Iron Age Iranian swords are pastiches, which, if you have no clue what that word means, me neither. I had to look it up, but effectively forgeries. They just wanted to sound very fancy.
Yeah, yeah. And if you're wondering why the snobbery today, well, we have two reasons here. Number one, this is a technical journal called for physicists and whatnot.
Journal of
And
Archaeological Sciences is the where the article originates.
yeah, screw that phrase. And the other reason is our old friend and foe, the British Museum.
It's always the British Museum, no matter what the context. In this case, they're mildly in the right, but there's still some things that they do that I personally disagree with. But
Yep.
before we even get to that, what happened here is the United Kingdom's Border Force, which badass name for Border Patrol, effectively confiscated a bunch of Iron Age Iranian swords that were attempted to be smuggled in. However, there's a little bit of something funky here because what they did is they did an X-ray study basically where they took a picture of the neutrons instead of protons, and they are able to see that these are basically modern smelted, glued together constructions of actual historic swords. They're basically just gluing together or doing Lego with old valuable swords and making them into one more valuable, authentic.
Yeah, two parts of two different broken blades will sell for less than one complete blade. So what people are doing is they're using glue, they're using drill bits, they're using fucking welding torches, anything they think they can scuff out and make look natural to combine these various artifacts, creating what I believe the article terms Frankenswords.
That's a good one. And this ended up becoming known because researchers, specifically a team from Cranfield University, the ISIS neutron and muon source, and the British Museum researched it. And what they were actually looking into was what they call bimetallic swords in between the Iron Age and the Bronze Age, and they wanted to see how these materials interacted and how they were potentially transitioned from one into another. However, upon doing so, they realized, hey, this is a lot of modern things. Uh, Key and point, you mentioned the drill bit. One of the swords still had a drill bit inside of it, and they would drill between the swords to attempt to glue them together, and they would do a bunch of other things to just try and smuggle and find or increase the value.
Yeah, yeah. These older blades are not as thin as we would think of a sword blade being in the modern day. And so it's fairly easy if you've got a broken edge to just drill right along that crevice, fill that with glue, and then you've got a nice little uh what was it, pock mark along which to stick two swords together. It would not be visible from the outside. It's actually a really clever trick.
It's very, very interesting, and it poses a lot of issues that authorities and researchers alike, because here they mention that this actually can complicate their research because they're trying to find authentic versions of this. However, in this instant, they're unable to do so, and it makes the task a lot more difficult. And it they do end up coming out and saying, Anna Federigo, who is an imaging scientist, said that any bronze bladed sword with an iron hilt may reveal to be a pastiche. So they're really going to have to continue studying this because this is quite interesting. This is quite bizarre. And,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be unlikely for this to have come out of Iran because Iran's always been at the cutting edge, no pun intended, of metallurgical advances. But it does mean that forgers and smugglers are getting smarter. They're getting more creative. They're adapting. They're
Yeah, and
using
it's
new techniques to try and fool people. And unless you have $1 million worth of equipment or the British Museum in your back pocket, you
Yeah,
know?
you'll never know. And it is, it's not an accident that they're targeting Iranian swords to do this, because Iran would have been the place where people first experimented with putting an iron blade into a bronze hilt. That would have been something that was done there thousands of years ago when the transition was first being made and people were first figuring this out. It's this idea of plausibility that they're feeding off of that makes finding actual examples to prove and establish the timelines so much more difficult. It creates a lot of extra work for everyone involved, and that's just very uncool.
Well, and it tends to follow a wider overall pattern where you see a majority of looting and of forgeries coming out of countries with instability and a lot of just overall hostile environments. Like it's one of those things where the instability and uncertainty do foster a culture of crime and of things like this. So it's really sad to see. But one of the things that I find very, very, very fascinating is the British Museum is hanging on to the swords until they can be repatriated to Iran. That is one of the things that I think they do great at. However, they are planning on displaying them until they are repatriated. So, the British Museum has to get their little fill in with this. They
Yeah.
have to get their display.
Well, personally, I think the British Museum is arguably the greatest institution on earth at pending repatriation. Getting it out the door never happens, but pending. Now that we can do for 200 years straight.
Yeah, because if it's pending, it's coming. We just haven't decided on a
Stunning.
timeline.
Yep.
It's just
It
it's
better be.
lovely. But this also is another thing that I did want to talk about. Just continuing on because with forgeries and reproductions, there's also a couple of other things that tend to come to light. Like with a lot of artworks, forgeries are able to be identified because of certain shades of brown colors, specifically the pigment mummy brown, which has not been made in over a century. And
There's a disgusting pigment. Let's stick to metallurgy, guys. All right, that is far less. Yeah,
but it's things like that, or even more interesting, like especially wines, because there's a lot of wine forgery, believe it or not, where they can test the carbon inside the bottle and see if it's pre or post nuclear discoveries.
yeah,
So there's a lot of techniques out there. Like scientists find ways to identify the forgeries. This is just a new one that has popped up, and I think that's a good point for us to wrap
yeah.
up. Thank you guys for watching. Let us know if you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one.